What's up, Coach Kevin?
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm okay. It's wet over here.
What's that?
It's wet over here.
That's distressing.
Why?
Because there's no other reason for that to be wet other than the fact that you've been sitting there for 5 minutes. Did you have a little accident, Coach Kevin?
It wasn't an accident.
It wasn't that easy on purpose. Hey, I like that you own up to it. You take pride. I don't think we have anybody watching today.
It is Friday.
I mean, come on now. What does Friday have to do with it? Like, people are out doing things, and it's a beautiful day outside here in sunny California.
It is pretty nice today.
Dude, you totally wrecked this bar. Are you gonna get a new bar?
Might have to.
I mean, it's an outrage. What's going on, Coach Kevin?
Just enjoying my Friday.
Enjoying your Friday? What's there to enjoy about it?
I don't know.
No?
It's Friday.
It's Friday?
Tomorrow's Saturday. That's cool.
Do you have any special plans for the weekend?
No.
No? Why not? Why don't you get some special plans?
I don't know. I just don't really do things.
You don't do anything on the weekends? You don't, like, hang out? Go
No,
somewhere?
That's not really doing anything though. Hanging out is like.
Read a book? See a movie? There's a big movie everyone wants to see right now.
What?
Coming to America 2.
Mm,
Did you ever see Coming to America 1?
yeah.
You weren't amused by it?
It's alright.
It was alright?
It's alright.
I mean, it's a classic. That's like
It's a classic. A lot of classics are alright. I don't know. It's fine. I had already seen all the other movies that Coming to America had like affected.
like what?
Influence. I don't know.
You're
Movies.
just making that up.
No, it's just like what was I think novel about Coming to America was just funny by the time I got around to it.
I mean, it was never like. I think there were only a few movies where I thought were that funny. You want to guess what movies I thought were like just incredibly funny movies?
Oh God, Blazing Saddles.
Is that like the oldest comedy you could think of?
Yeah.
No,
Actually.
no. Like laugh out loud, like.
Airplane.
No, I
Naked Gun.
I couldn't watch Airplane when I was a kid because there was nudity in it, brief nudity, and so like you couldn't, as a kid, you couldn't watch. I couldn't go into like an R-rated theater.
You didn't watch movies after they came out?
I mean, I did eventually see Airplane, and it is amusing, but it wasn't.
I saw Naked Gun the other day for the first time,
Yeah.
and it's hilarious.
Yeah, I never really got into Naked Gun.
I didn't expect it to be as funny as it was, but it's condensed with jokes.
Yes.
It's like
well, Airplane's the same way. It's like rapid fire.
yeah, it's
jokes.
crazy. It's fun to watch.
No. Okay, so no. It's a little more contemporary than that, right? That's like from the 70s and early 80s. They made like 5 Airplanes.
Police Academy.
Those were funny. There was actually the first one was funny, and the rest of them sucked.
I was really into sound effects when I watched.
Well, yeah, there's that guy. What was his name? He's still around, I think.
Too Tall something? Wasn't that his name?
No, that was the other guy. That was a football player.
I forget.
The guy who did the sound effects was a different person altogether.
Oh yeah.
Try again.
I saw a YouTube video of that guy actually recently.
Yeah, he's still around.
Yeah.
I was like, what happened to that guy? He's still around.
Let's see. God, it's not Blazing Saddles.
No, I've never even seen Blazing Saddles.
Comedies.
Like laugh out loud, like holy crap, that's so funny.
I want to say Ace Ventura just because.
That is pretty funny. Ace Ventura was pretty funny. That's true. There's something about Mary.
Oh God.
Dude, that is hilarious. That is hilarious. You know what I love about that movie? Is that they
not sure
the joke, they always take it too far, right?
Uh-huh.
So you have the scene, like I'll give you an example, is when Ben Stiller's character is taking Mary out for prom, and he's in the house, right? And he's in the bathroom while she's going upstairs with the mom. And she's getting ready, and so then he's looking upstairs. Somehow from the downstairs bathroom, you can see the bedroom that they're in. And so he's looking up there, and then the mom sees him looking, right? Whatever. So, and she like makes a gross look, like, ew, why are you looking through this window? You're gross,
Yeah.
right? And so then he's distracted, and in that moment, as he pulls up his zipper, he catches his scrotum in the zipper,
Yeah.
right? And so, he's screaming the whole thing, whatever.
Yeah.
And then you have people start coming in, right? Like, like the mom's there, the dad's there, the fireman comes in, and then he's like, hey, you gotta come and take a look at this, and then the policeman comes in. But then, like, that's funny enough, right? Like, you're talking about pork and beans. He's like, is it the pork that's caught? Is it the beans? He's like, he looks, he's like, oh, it's a double decker. It's a 2-alarm blaze.
How did that get under that?
Yes.
Was that the we've got to?
But then what's the funny part of that is that they flash to it, so you actually see it. So they always take it to they use the whole joke, right?
Yeah.
Like they really, and they do that again and again and again.
For some reason, I don't remember the flashing. I must have seen it on TV or something.
Oh, maybe they cut that part out.
Maybe.
They do that with the old woman's like he's trying to like spy what's his face's character, the other guy, Matt Dillon's character is like trying to spy on Mary, the guy with the big teeth.
Yeah.
And then so he's trying to spy on Mary, but then he gets her like 75-year-old like heavily tanned like skin damaged roommate instead.
Yeah.
Right. That's hilarious.
Lucky guy.
You get to see that in all its glory. But I just like the visual gags, that are at the end of it.
Did you like Animal House?
That was okay, but it wasn't like, that was more like, how do I want to put it? I mean, I don't even remember Animal House that much, but it was, it was kind of more like, oh, you weren't supposed to watch it as a kid, and if you watched it, it was like, oh,
yeah.
I don't know, I didn't think it was that, it was funny, but I didn't think it was like that clever.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that the Farrelly brothers are clever either. I just think they really know how to tell a joke. And visually how to, it's like dumb humor. I love dumb humor.
Yeah. Chris Farley?
No, that's a different person. The Farrelly brothers are the directors of like Something About Mary, and then they made a bunch of other ones too.
Different.
They're all, kind of similar, over the top.
Farrelly brothers, what are you saying?
Farrelly? Maybe Farrelly's different than Farley. Maybe I'm saying their name wrong.
Oh,
Oh, I know what I'm going to talk to you about.
What?
I did a little research
Why?
on Watchmen. And fill in some of these blanks on Watchmen.
Oh, okay.
Now, I didn't go back and actually read the comic. I just read like a synopsis of it.
Yeah.
So this might jog your memory or whatever, but so I had read this so long ago, so I didn't know, and I only read it once, and I was not like overly impressed with it when I read it. Right? I mean, I thought it was good, but I wasn't like, oh my god, this is the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
So I had forgotten a lot of the details, but it's an alternate kind of reality where the United States won the Vietnam War. Dr. Manhattan becomes like our secret weapon, right? And brings essentially order to the world because everyone's afraid of him, right? And he's a U.S., he's American. So he's on our side. So his abilities actually...
He's a metaphor for atomic weapons, right?
Yes, essentially,
Yeah.
Right? Having this tremendous weapon, superiority, or military superiority. In any event, like Richard Nixon wins, second term, he doesn't have to resign, right? Because the Watergate never happens.
Yeah.
So, there's this whole, and then superheroes at some point get banned, except for Dr. Manhattan and the guy who is killed in the very beginning.
The laughing guy.
The comedian.
Yeah.
So he's killed in the very beginning. That's what gets Rorschach, whatever his name is, the Rorschach test, Rorschach.
Yeah.
That's what gets him. He hears about superheroes getting killed, and he goes and he's a vigilante.
Yeah.
Even though he's not supposed to be doing anything. And the other thing that's interesting is that none of these guys actually, except for Dr. Manhattan, have any kind of superhero powers.
Yes.
Like actual, there are no mutants. Nobody's actually.
Yeah, Rorschach is just crazy and he smells bad.
And that Night Owl is kind of like Batman. Isn't based on Batman apparently, but is kind of like Batman. Has like all the devices,
I think,
vehicles.
Rorschach is Batman's craziness.
Yes, yeah.
And then
it's kind of
Night
separate.
Owl is like Batman's.
So then, what happens is that, according to the synopsis, okay, I don't know how much stock to put on it. Maybe you can correct it if it's wrong. someone accuses Dr. Manhattan of giving cancer to like to everybody. He's radioactive.
No, it was the woman he was sleeping with, especially, right? And because
maybe, but the event of it is that he's like, okay, F it, I'm out, and he goes to Mars, and he lives in Mars.
They called him onto that television show, and they were like, look at all these people you murdered.
So he leaves. He's like, fine, I'm out, and he's becoming more and more divorced from like humanity anyway.
Reality,
right? Because he's essentially immortal. He's all powerful. He's not human anymore, right? So he goes to Mars, and the problem is that upsets the balance. And so Russia now invades Afghanistan, and now there becomes like all this instability in the world that everyone starts fighting because the United States no longer has military, no longer has Dr. Manhattan to back them up. It's like Superman disappears. Remember when Superman disappeared?
Yeah.
And then all the bad guys, and then Batman, same thing. Batman disappears, and then like all the bad guys are like, oh, it's a problem.
Yeah.
Right? So then that's when Ozymandias, right, is like, look at all these terrible people, and everything's upset. They're all fighting with each other, and we're headed toward the path of actual nuclear war, right?
Yeah.
So he starts this plot, right? And that's why a comedian gets murdered, right? Or one of the reasons why a comedian gets murdered. And then he murders a bad guy.
Yeah, his like old writer.
Mordant or something. I forget what his name is.
The weird, not a Morlock kind of looking guy, but he was Mole Man. Yeah.
What was it?
It was like Mole Man, something.
Something. So he's, there's a bunch of people who die, and basically to cover up this plot.
Yeah.
And then Ozymandias comes together, like you were saying. He has essentially has this giant space alien squid destroy New York. But all the while, Rorschach is like figuring this stuff out.
Yeah.
And I think he gets, at some point,
he hooks up with Night Owl and Spectre.
And then at some point, the girlfriend, Dr. Manhattan's girlfriend, convinces him to come back to Earth. Rorschach kind of tells them, like, this is what, no. Let me see if I get this right. New York gets blown up. Dr. Manhattan comes back. He notices that something at the North Pole is like preventing him from like
seeing.
So he goes there,
yeah.
And then they find out that Ozymandias, this is like the whole thing, right? And it's already been done. And it is. You're right. It does work in the sense that the nations of the Earth stop fighting amongst each other and start kind of cooperating in anticipation of this like further alien invasion, which was totally fake.
Yeah.
So then. They kind of the question I think that's left with is at some point Ozymandias says, I did the right thing in the end, and Dr. Manhattan says basically there is no end.
Yeah.
And then they leave it at that. But Rorschach at some point is like, I'm gonna, and he mails his notebook to this newspaper or whatever it is, right? And so then they kill Rorschach. Because he's going to tell them, right? But at the very end, you see the editor of this newspaper say, like, let's run with his story.
They say, let's run.
They don't say they did. So they say, let's run. So he's like, basically, we need some filler. So go look in the crazy bin, right? Where people write to us all the time about their crazy conspiracy theories, and we'll pick that. We'll run with that because we need some filler in the next issue.
Yeah.
And so you see the intern, the person reaching into the bin, and it's Rorschach's notebook. So they kind of leave it open as to what happens after that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting, because the other thing I was reading about them is that they kind of wanted to send up a bunch of essentially moral questions.
Yeah.
Right? They don't pretend to give any answers. They just sort of say, what they leave it up to the reader, so to speak, to decide, where they fall in terms of, deciding what's the moral of the story, which is probably going to differ by the reader.
I appreciate how the most morally rigid person is also like the crazy, he's like the crazy smelly guy that nobody likes. He has the strongest set of moral principles, the most unwavering, I would say.
Yeah, well his it's
the closest to Kantian ethics.
The people that are, like bright line, right, wrong, good, evil, as opposed to,
I mean, minus the murdering, but he's very, he has a code, I guess you could say, even though it's like one that would be considered atypical. for most people who want to function in society.
Right.
And then like the most morally gray person is also like the most successful, the smartest guy, the most capable person, but he also like
But he also murders millions of people and a bunch of other people.
But he also saves the world.
Well, here's the thing. That's what Dr. Manhattan is, I think, suggesting, is that there is no end, right? Like, there is no, I mean, you could read that a lot of different ways, right? In one sense, you could say, you know, look, if you're thinking that there's that being right at the end of the day, right? There's a thing that's that kind of saying. There is no end of the day.
Yeah.
Right? That there is no conclusion. There's never going to be like, a final accounting of what was right and wrong.
Yeah.
Because there's no one keeping score at the end of the day.
Well, the alive people get to keep score.
What's that?
Don't the alive people get to keep score?
The which people?
The alive people, the ones that.
Well, they're going to die too.
Eventually, but like.
Right? I mean, except for maybe Dr. Manhattan, everyone else is going to die. No one else is immortal, and we don't even know if Dr. Manhattan is truly immortal. I mean, he seems to be headed into a situation where, so he decides to come back and kind of help humanity because of another interesting story about his girlfriend, who is the daughter of the man who raped her mother.
Yes.
But then they make up, and they actually have a real relationship, a loving relationship, apparently. I don't know if that's true or not.
It was a complicated relationship.
But and that convinces Dr. Manhattan to come back and intervene in human affairs again.
Weird.
Which is a very interesting thing, right? So anyway, it is a morally ambiguous, we'll put it this way, it doesn't decide for you what is and what isn't moral, right? It just poses the questions.
Yeah. I think it purposefully sets up a lot of relationships between like the types of morality and the characters that they use.
Yeah.
But
well, that utilitarian mindset is something that I think people are kind of like, when you are a business person, right? You're an industrialist. That's kind of how the people say that you think.
yeah.
I'm not sure if that's true or not. That's a popular conception.
Yeah.
But you know, the greatest good for the greatest number of people is an interesting concept because it does this. I mean, it can. I shouldn't say it does, but it can suggest or rely upon the idea that you can count up the greatest good.
Yeah.
That there is this endpoint where that's another way of reading it, to say like, what you've done or what you do may be the greatest good for the greatest number of people right now as you look at it. But 100 years from now, there could be, or 1,000, or whatever number of years, it could be, you could set in motion, right? Like, it's like the, would you kill baby Hitler, right? Kind of idea of, well, I mean, you're murdering an innocent child who will grow up to murder and be responsible for the deaths of millions upon millions of people. So I'm doing it by murdering this child, this innocent child. I'm doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people. The only victim is baby Hitler. But you don't know all the other permutations of what's going to happen because of that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
you can't really logically.
Hitler was not the only cause of, he was a pretty major part of the cause.
It's a representative.
But, I mean, there were a lot of bad things going on, outside of Hitler. So it's an interesting, I'm sure, I don't know. I think I don't know. That's an interesting question. Because you don't know what the results are, right? You don't know what, but it is wrong to kill babies.
Usually.
As a general rule, innocent babies. Now, guilty babies are another thing.
Yeah, a baby stole my watch once.
That's it. Oh, we got a viewer in chat.
Oh, God.
Oh, Kevin is the Monkey King.
Nice. I like that.
Do you have some kettlebells too? You're working out with us? Or you can get a pole and start doing wushu or whatever that is. All right, don't hit me with it. What you're fixated on that pole, aren't you?
I used to really like.
The bow staff? Did you carry your bow staff around with you?
I actually, yeah, I wrote a one-act play with my friend, partly so that I could perform in front of a large audience with bow staff. It was pretty fun. I dropped it. It was embarrassing.
Oh.
It was okay.
It happens.
We still haven't had our submission talk yet.
What's submission talk?
What is a submission?
What is it? Haven't we always had this talk? We have this talk every time we have a talk.
No.
In one way or another.
We've never really hashed it out. Because
What is a submission?
Every time it comes up, we avoid it.
I don't know if that's true. I guess you could have multiple definitions for submission. It doesn't have to be one thing. So you can define it as, I mean, you can have whole DVDs and instructional videos on, you know, the rear naked choke and the triangle and the arm lock and whatever other submission technique there is, right? And so there's the submission as a noun.
I feel like
Is a class of techniques designed to disable and or get your opponent to surrender or submit.
it's a class of techniques.
I mean, there are techniques that you can do that are not technically submissions, but they will either render your opponent, what's the word I'm looking for? They'll neutralize them or they'll make them want to quit, right? I mean, if you have a good knee on belly or knee on neck, that's not a submission hold that we would normally say,
But if you use it to submit a person, it is, right?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, right? You could turn it into, if I intend, so there's an intention, right?
Yeah.
If I'm applying this, well, I don't know that it's not an arm lock. No, but you're right. If I use something, I mean, I could use, we don't do finger breaks, but that is a submission,
Yeah.
right?
I think I don't know. I think that the submission is like a happening, like a phenomenon.
So that could be the verb, right? That could be, that's still a noun.
Well,
it's an event.
Yeah, the event.
That's an event.
It's like the point at which the person realizes that they can't do anything, and they like submit. They give up.
Well, when the person says
they acknowledge their lack of control of the
Yes.
situation, and they acknowledge that there's nothing that they can do about it, and if whatever happens continues, they will sustain whatever thing that they don't want to sustain.
True. Okay, that's fair enough. That's a good one.
I like that as opposed to applying it to like a type of submission, because
I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
I agree,
But you can prefer one or the other.
What I don't like about like applying it to submissions themselves is like, what do you do about submissions that don't work, right? Like if I put you in an armbar but it doesn't work, was that a submission? Versus when you tap. We know for sure that it was a submission because you submitted.
So it's just not nomenclature, right?
Yeah.
It's just I'm talking about some techniques. I'm going to file them under, the term submission.
Yeah.
Right? That's different. That's a different usage than the way that you're doing it, which is it only counts when the person actually gives up.
But when we're talking
But even
about
a failed submission is not all I'm saying is that you attempted one of the techniques designed to submit and you failed. It doesn't mean it's not a member of that or a part of that class of techniques.
But when we're talking about like a person submitting another person,
yes,
is the submission part? Who is doing the submitting? Is person A submitting person B, or is person B submitting to person A?
Well, I mean that's the slippery part too, because you can imagine. Well, this has happened, right? Like there's a famous match between Roger Gracie and Kakareko, I don't know if that's how you say his name, but at Abu Dhabi, where it went on for something like an hour or something.
Wow.
And eventually he submitted, not because Roger did anything to him, but because he was so exhausted he couldn't continue.
Yeah.
Right? So he just gave up.
Yeah.
So, you're using that term as a shorthand for the person giving up, essentially, right? For whatever reason. Like, you can have it's kind of like running a race, right? If I had the power, and this happens on the mat, right? Like sometimes you have people in cardio tap, right? They just get so tired, they just give up. Not because they got submitted, it's because they gave up. And so, yeah, that leaves a bad taste in your mouth. But, you know, it's kind of like if I could make you run around a track, right? If I could make you run a 10-minute mile, you'd probably run for a long time. But even if you could, if I started making you run a 5-minute mile, you'd give up real quick. Yeah. I mean, you might want to keep going. You might say, like, I can physically still, or like, my legs can still move, but a 4 or a 5 or a 3-minute, like, nobody can run a 3-minute mile, right? So if you could make somebody kind of put out that kind of work, and you can intend to do that, right? You can intend, I often think like Leandro Lowe, a big part, now he's amazing, but a big part of his success, and same thing with Marigali, is they go so hard for the whole match.
But then is that part of the submission then? Like is part of the submission, like, okay, today we're gonna do this, but keep in mind, it only works if 5 minutes before you do it, you get them really tired.
Well, it's a way to make someone give up. Right? So if you're gonna classify what you're talking about as a way to make someone give up, that is a way. Or maybe it's a way to soften them up, right? It's a way to get the person so tired that they can't defend as intelligently as they could have or might have if you had taken a more normal pace.
So that's not necessary.
Pace is a way to, or even pressure, right? You can pressure someone so hard that they just want to tap. Even before, it's kind of like when you have an arm lock and you're cranking on the shoulder so hard that you don't even have to break the grips in order to get the person to tap. Yeah. Right? That's the same idea, right? Like you're kind of making them an offer that they can't refuse, but you're not like straightening the arm out. Which would be the completion of a traditional arm lock, right? I mean, so it's what. I guess it also depends on like what is the benefit of even thinking about these things or including that in there. I mean, if you said like you're saying, it's kind of absurd to say, well, just making somebody really tired is a submission, right? Or if I just keep my knee on their stomach for long enough and they can't breathe, that's a submission. Well, the person did submit, but I think most people wouldn't say that falls within the traditional class of submissions. Yeah. Well, there's some people, I mean, look, Mario Sperry was famous for knee on belly, right? And just sucking the life out of you or his opponents with that technique. I think Gordon Ryan really went towards breaking Roberto Jimenez's spirit when he passed him with knee on belly. He did double knee on belly at one point. And you could see Jimenez like wincing in pain. And like when someone does that to you in the middle of a really competitive match and you can't catch your breath, that could be even for that split second.
But I wouldn't consider that to be part of the submission that ultimately lost.
I mean, everyone is entitled to draw whatever line they want.
Yeah, that just seems very it seems like a reach. But
well, I mean, again, it's like all these things are kind of arbitrary or subjective about, when you decide, like that's the, it's the opposite of what you're saying when you say, when your response to my, submissions are a class of techniques that are designed to make somebody give up. And you say, well, but there's these other things. And you're, well, yeah, that's true. There are other things, there's other ways of using the word. And you can say, well, it's kind of slippery, it doesn't quite accomplish. Well, yeah, I mean, all these things are.
What I think is important is
communication, like what is it exactly you're trying to communicate to somebody?
Especially when you're rolling with a person and you guys both have two different expectations of what a submission is. Like what is the appropriate time to end the match? For me when I roll, my general rule is if the arm gets straight, like I double check and then I give them a couple seconds tap. Yeah. And then if they don't do it, then I start to slowly apply force.
Sure.
But
that's when they give you the option to actually slowly apply and check on them.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, to me, it's a very simple decision, right? Like, what is a submission? Like when I'm applying one, is okay.
But it's dangerous to have a miscommunication or a misunderstanding because, like, if I've had people, and this isn't like terrible. It's not like we're avoiding. This isn't a conversation about avoiding injuries, but like I would. fully extended someone's arm, and then they used that opportunity to escape. And they escaped because like I thought that that's all I needed to do to get a person to tap, right?
Sure.
Because I was just like kind of used to people tapping at that point, right? But if the person disagrees, right? Like the submission isn't just when that arm is extended. It's not just when you think you have it.
Right.
Like that other person still needs to give up.
Well,
And
I mean,
like,
that's like the completion of the submission. When is the submission complete? The submission is complete when the person taps or you break it to the point that it can't be broken any further.
but even if you break it though, that's not necessarily
Not
the
necessarily.
completion of the submission because they haven't submitted yet.
True, but you've attempted a submission.
They're tapped.
You executed. I mean, if I break your arm, right? This is the semantic game you're
Yeah.
playing, right? I mean, in the sense that if you say submission is, a technique designed to do X, right? Make the person submit. I mean, I can still execute the submission, and I can do it perfectly. If the person decides not to tap, they did not submit, which is the verb, to submit, right? But I did apply the submission, which is the noun,
Yeah.
right? So these things are different, right? And you could come up with new words if you wanted to.
Mhm.
You could say the submission technique versus the act of submission, right? A more prosaic way of distinguishing those two words that we use almost interchangeably. And I think when you do jiu-jitsu, you kind of intuitively at least come to know, the difference between those.
To apply a submission versus to submit a person. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't submitted you. I can apply the submission perfectly, but if you don't actually tap or scream, I haven't submitted you.
But wait.
Because one is a noun and one is a verb. And
But
these
when
words
you-
mean
but
different
when you
things when
put-
they're used in different contexts.
But when you say if you do a thing perfectly
Yes.
and then it doesn't work.
Yeah, but that doesn't, it doesn't mean, to do something perfectly does not mean to necessarily achieve, right? To execute the technique
What?
does not mean that you necessarily accomplish.
That's the point of the technique.
No, not at all.
If I press a vending machine
But
button
it
and
may be,
snacks don't
no,
come
you're
out,
right.
the
It
machine
may be
doesn't
the
work.
point of the technique, but the technique itself, is in a platonic sense, is itself, right? It is a thing unto itself. Now I can apply it to you,
No.
right? And it may or may not work, but that doesn't mean. Now you can judge. Now you could say the perfection part. You could add that into it. You could say perfection is actually achieving the result. But I'll give you the example. Here's the example that comes to my mind. Of course you know this. Hodger executes a perfect arm lock against Jacare, right? He breaks Jacare's arm. We all know this. It's never been disputed, right? He executed an arm lock, and he's one of the best guys, maybe if not one of the best guys that ever do jiu-jitsu competitively. He knows how to do an arm lock. He did it perfectly. He broke his arm, and Jacare decided not to tap, right?
Man.
Okay, like a boss. Now, I don't think it takes anything away from the technique itself to say that, it's a different thing, right? It's a different idea of like
Yeah, I agree.
whether one is.
In the example in which the arm did break, I agree with you. But like
I
otherwise,
mean, I guess the thing is that no matter how let's say there's a tool, right, and it's made perfectly well, and you're using it the correct way, it will still have a failure rate. There'll be some, and part of that failure rate in this case is the person deciding to sacrifice their body. Right? That's part of, 99% of people will tap to, look, here's the thing. Let's say it's 90, there's a few people who won't tap to an arm lock in competition. That number, I think, is growing.
an arbitrary number.
Right? Whatever. Gordon Ryan's not going to tap to an arm lock. Roberto Jimenez is not going to tap to an arm lock. These guys don't tap to ankle locks. They don't tap to toe holds. They won't tap to, the Meows won't tap to any low. I've never seen them tap to anything, right? They just are not going to tap. That one kid had him in a knee bar. You could see the torque on the force on the knee. He still won't tap, okay? They will take damage. That's just like saying, okay, 5% of the people, 5% of the people in high-level competition are not going to tap to you, right? They are going to eat the pain and the damage. So your failure rate, even with assuming a proper, perfect application, of a given technique is going to be 5%.
No.
If they're in your pool of competitors.
No, that means you need to change your armbar or change whatever technique to accommodate for the situation.
If a person isn't going to tap,
no,
it's not a problem.
If there's a 5% chance of you running.
No, it's a 5% chance of someone not tapping.
Yeah, if there's a 5% chance
your
of
technique
someone not
has
tapping.
failed.
No, ergo, you need to change your technique so that it works.
That's not how it works.
No, like if your armbar doesn't stop a match after you break someone's arm, you need to fix the armbar. Like when you break someone's arm, you should be able to just.
If I take a bat to somebody's knee, right?
Yeah.
And I blow out their knee, right? And they keep fighting.
Yeah.
Is that a problem with my bat? Or is it the fact
that's
that
a problem with
that's
the
a
technique?
person? No, I blew out their knee.
You need to keep swinging at the knee. Like
well, I only get one chance. There's a time limit. I only get so many whacks at the knee. I wail him. It blows out his knee. But you know what? The person is a maniac. They keep fighting.
Should have swung harder. Should have swung it in a different place.
I bury bonds and I swing for a home run.
Maybe you should have studied up on knee anatomies before.
So the problem is not. The failure rate is not.
Maybe
now there's a different failure rate for like actual application of the arm lock. Right? Like you can say someone has an arm lock that is 95% effective, except for maybe there's some little technical hole in what they're doing or how they're responding to a counter effects. And so you can see sometimes it's like Gordon Ryan. He gets Felipe Pena in a leg release. Right? And he basically has almost 100% finishing rate from that position.
But are you saying that this leg lace was perfect?
So, no, it's not. Well, there's a hole in that technique, however Gordon applied it. Now, whether it's the hole in the technique, or some techniques have a counter to them that you can do within a certain window of time, or if you have a certain level of flexibility or whatever timing, and then some techniques are, they just, you did something wrong, right? And part of that could be, like you're saying, is I give somebody a chance. Like that's what happened to Gordon and Roberto Jimenez. He stopped on the arm lock and didn't break it because he wanted to give Roberto a chance to tap. And Roberto escaped, right? So that's not even a problem with the arm lock per se, because he did the exact same thing to tap him. What it is a problem in his application of the arm lock, because he didn't execute, he didn't finish on it, because he wanted to give a little bit of a chance. He did a decent thing and give somebody a chance to tap. That's not a problem with the technique.
It's a strategic
That's his application. Right, that's different, right? If I take my bat and I just come over and I like tap you like this, and it doesn't break your elbow, well, yeah, that's me. That's on me. If I take a good swing with a good bat, let's see the bat breaks, right? It's a shot. It's balsa wood. It's a balsa bat, and it just breaks. Well, that's a crappy balsa bat.
Yeah, but
right? If I do everything right and I break your arm and you keep fighting, that's because you're.
Right.
That's you. That's right. I did everything right.
No, you didn't do the right thing.
Well, I did that technique. It's not a problem with the technique.
That thing.
It's not a problem with the technique. It's not even a problem with how I did it.
It
accomplished the goal that I wanted.
If the technique that you use is the wrong technique, like that is what is wrong with the technique.
No, if I shoot a gun, right? If I take a gun and I shoot whatever, the target.
Yeah.
Yes, okay? Let's say I don't know what, I don't want to talk about shooting people, but in fact, we might even get in trouble with YouTube. Let's not talk about that.
Nerf guns. What do you
Nerf
want?
guns.
Spears.
Well, it's a different thing.
Paintball.
It's a different thing. Sometimes you do something, you use a piece of equipment, and for whatever reason, the piece of equipment doesn't, like let's say I'm trying to use a screw that's a wood screw, and I put it into concrete. Yeah. I don't know. I'm reaching for an example here. I use my screwdriver or my drill to drill the screwdriver into and it doesn't work. Well, it's not because the drill's not working. It's not because I'm not even pushing the drill correctly. It's because I'm using the wrong screw for the job. That's one example, right? Yeah. Where whatever it is, the tool that I'm using is perfectly fine. I'm just doing something, or alternatively, maybe as I'm using everything right, I'm going to screw in, and then the electricity goes off, right? And so now I can't. The tool won't work because I don't have electricity anymore.
That's the wrong tool.
Well, it may be the wrong tool, but there's nothing wrong with the tool.
But like when you're using it in that,
that's a different thing too.
It's 100%
That's a totally different
wrong.
thing.
Like,
if I'm using a hammer as a screwdriver,
That's
There's nothing wrong with the hammer.
Yeah, it is. It's
No,
what's
no,
wrong. No,
it's
what,
the hammer's
what's,
the hammer.
what's wrong with it is
The
that
hammer
it's
is
not a
the hammer.
screwdriver.
Well, yes, it's
That's what's wrong with it.
Well,
What's wrong with it is that it's not the thing that
that's
you
me
should be
using the wrong tool. It's not the problem. So if let's say I'm in a match, right? And it's a no time limit match, and it's submission only. And all I do the whole time is I pass the guard. I pass the guard 1,000,000 times. I do it great. Oh, 1,000,000 times, great, awesome.
Yeah.
I get no points for that. In any IBJJ event, I would have won 1,000 to nothing, right? Well, I'm doing the pass correctly because it's working. It's just I'm not doing the right thing in the right time.
Yeah, those aren't submissions.
That's not what you should be doing.
Yeah,
You're not going to get points for that, right?
Well, you could do that if that leads.
But I'm not doing the wrong technique. There's nothing wrong with the technique, right?
Well, it's wrong if doing so.
That's just a bad strategy.
Doing if doing that strategy prevents you from getting the submission, then yeah, that's the wrong technique.
Well, but there's nothing wrong with the technique.
That's different. There is something wrong with the technique.
There's nothing wrong.
That's not the correct technique.
But that's fine. But it's the wrong tool for the job. It's nothing wrong with the tool itself, right? You can have this. You can play these variables out any way you want.
What's wrong with the tool is that whatever it was about that tool, what's wrong with it was that you thought that it was the right tool.
Well, then that's on you.
No, that's also on the tool. Like that's part of the tool.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, well, part of the tool is
has no agency in this.
included in the tool is like application of when to use it, right? Like, and you look at the tool, you decide to apply it to this situation, it doesn't work. That's the wrong tool. The technique is flawed.
Well, maybe not the technique.
The technique is
so
flawed.
Look,
If you have an arsenal of tools on your tool shelf. You have a task to do.
Sure.
You look at all of your tools.
Yes.
You think, this tool will let me do this, 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 and this. Perfect.
Yes.
You grab it, it doesn't work, the tool's wrong.
Well, if the tool is actually designed for the purpose at hand, and you are using the tool correctly, and the tool doesn't accomplish the task that it is designed to do, then yes, then it's a poorly made tool.
Yeah,
right? But that's different. That's different than I take a tool down off the shelf that is not designed for the task at hand. That's not the tool's problem. There's nothing wrong inherently with the tool. The tool is me because I'm not making a good decision about what the tool is that I should be using for the task at hand.
Now imagine your tools are your hands.
Okay.
Right? You have a job.
Yes.
And you're gonna go pick something up with your hands.
Yes.
Right?
But what my hands are designed to do.
Yeah.
So up to a point.
Yeah. And then
like they're not designed to pick up like hot plates.
Right? These are the perfect tools for the job. I go in here.
Yes. Yes.
So
well, that's not how the tool is meant to be used. There's nothing wrong with your hands in that example.
You told me to use my hands.
You're not. So the hands. How do you pick something up? You pick something up like this. I'm using my hands correctly. If I try to pick it up with one finger, right? Now some people might be strong enough to do it, but most I can get there, right? But if I try to do it with my pinky, right? Even if I could do it, I would hurt myself. Like if I could force myself to do it, I'm going to hurt myself. The problem is not my hand. My hand is perfectly functional. It will perform the task if I use it correctly.
Yeah, the problem is your technique. The technique is wrong.
Correct.
Yeah, the technique that you're doing is wrong.
But not the tool.
The technique
this is wrong.
The technique
this is right.
The technique is the tool.
This is probably wrong too. The technique is not the tool. They're two
You
different things.
can't
That's why we have
separate
words
the
for it.
technique from the practitioner is the problem.
Oh, you might.
No, you can't.
Why not?
Because the person,
well, look, here's the thing.
The person and the technique are
Kevin,
like the same system.
I'm smaller than you. I'm weaker than you. I may not be able to do this. You might be able to do it, right? It'd still be not a smart thing to do, not the best, most efficient way, but you can still do it. Why? Because you're a different person. You have the tool that you're using, your hand, attached to your arm, and your body, is different than mine.
I come over here, I'm doing it.
Yes, you can do it. Don't hurt yourself, though.
Maybe you just don't have the technique. Maybe I just know how to do it.
We're just both doing it.
No, we both have hands. You have a pinky.
Yes, but I'm not strong.
You have a pinky.
Right, because that's why you have different sizes.
No, you don't know. Like,
right, you have different size hammers, you have different size saws.
How much more stronger? How much stronger? How much more strong can my pinky be compared to yours?
I don't know. I'm just saying that it is stronger. That's all I'm saying.
It's the way
it's a different tool.
It's wrong.
It's a different tool. So, I mean, I agree that when we go back to the idea of the submission could be applied perfectly in a perfect manner, right? We could all look at it and be like, that's the perfect submission. if another person
If a
decides,
whole group of people
Now-
decides that a thing is correct, it doesn't make it
not
correct.
necessarily,
The
but
thing
in
is
our
correct if
case,
it
we would
works.
all agree that we would look and say that Podger
as soon as the guy
did the
taps,
perfect armbar.
as soon as the guy taps, that's when you're like, yeah, okay, we can all agree that that was the functional arm lock. You can never identify
Okay.
a perfect arm bar.
Okay.
Or a perfect arm lock. It's just
Sure.
you know,
It could be,
works.
it could be a crappy arm lock and the guy could still tap,
Yeah,
right?
that's a perfect arm bar.
No, false.
Perfect. If it works, it's perfect.
That's false.
Oh.
And you
Why?
know it's false.
No, I.
Why is it
completely
false?
believe it. No, I completely.
If
believe
it
this.
works, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that when you look at perfection, you generally say, is it something that is, I'm just
The
going to make this
question
up, is it repeatable?
Yeah, if it's repeatable, that's different. But if it works, I think that
Well-
that is when a submission is good. If it works, it's good.
But is
If
that-
it doesn't
is the
work, it's
phrase-
bad. If you do,
Any port in a storm and
if
any.
you, if you
is it-
carry out a perfect list of techniques on a person,
Mhm.
like to the letter, to the
Yes.
spirit, and
Yes.
it doesn't work, that's
Again, you're confusing the noun or the what is the word? You're confusing
noun to the verb.
not the noun to the verb, but I don't want to say cause from the effect.
The
Right?
recipient
You,
versus
you can
the,
have the effect, right? You can have a desired effect
yeah,
with a
the
suboptimal
intention
intent.
versus the consequence.
You're looking at the result.
Yeah.
You're saying perfection is based on the result,
Yes.
right? So it's kind of now, I mean, there is a certain, I guess you could make that argument to a certain extent.
It's more like what I'm trying to say is we could say it might be perfect if it works. We can't say it's perfect. We say like it might be. It worked.
Well,
it worked.
Just the
there's
fact
a
that it works,
possibility.
it's kind of like the old saying that a broken clock is still right twice a day.
Yeah, but it's like
But
it's
the fact
closer to functional. It's closer to perfection than an armbar carried out step by step in the exact way you were taught. That doesn't work.
Well, here's again. It may be that you could trip and fall and submit your opponent in a
And that would
competition.
at the time be the perfect thing
And
to do.
it would be
I
a
would rely
fortuitous
on it.
thing.
I would rely on it.
Well,
to do
that's
it
the
every
thing,
turn.
right? Like we
But
don't
it
just
was
tell
perfect.
people to go because we don't say to people just do whatever you want, and if it works, it's perfect.
No, what I don't
When
like
someone
is-
tells you, like, Kevin, can you show me an arm lock? Like, teach me how to do an arm lock. You're not just like, I just kind of grab the wrist and then I like kind of jerk my hips around and I pull the wrist somewhere, and like, I don't really worry about perfect because, you know what, if it works at the time, if I can get you to tap, then that's the perfect submission.
Yeah.
Right? I just like, yank on things.
Yeah,
Like,
and
no,
then-
you are actually very particular about every little detail. Every little detail. Why?
But for
Why? If
reasons.
it wasn't, if
It's
that
not
was your
because I
philosophy,
have.
why would you pay so much
It's not
attention to
because
it?
I have an idea of what a perfect technique is, right? It's not like I'm building a thing and comparing it to what this like platonic perfect idea of this thing that I'm doing. I do things because the things that I do have reasons behind them.
What? Oh, what are the reasons, Kevin?
I don't know.
Tell us more about the reasons.
I don't know them. Like sometimes.
Oh, you don't know them? You're such a liar.
No, like sometimes it's just stuff that I do because I've done it. Because the last
and
time.
why do you keep doing it?
Because the last
Why
time I
did
did it, it worked.
No, not just the last time.
And the time before that.
And how many times before it? Why? And what does that mean?
It's a gradual
what is it?
process.
It starts with an R. What's the word I'm looking for? Starts with repeatable.
Repeatability.
Yes.
Right, but the
Why do you
first-
use it? You got a high success
But the
rate.
thing is, the first time that it works, it wasn't repeated.
there's
The
always-
second time it worked, it wasn't repeated. Only the third time that usually when I'm rolling with someone, right? This is the process by which I like create.
Something is
or, like,
repeatable whether you
refine
repeat it or
techniques.
not. If you're like so
Hold
here's
on,
for instance.
hold on. When I'm like when I'm learning techniques or the process of finding new techniques.
We're not talking about that process.
Usually,
though.
are we?
No.
Oh, what are we
No,
talking about?
I mean, no one is just, we're not talking about like how do you come up with a technique. Yes, in that moment, you may or may not know all the elements that are going to wind up staying or going or whatever it is that build into whatever the final or more developed or evolved technique will be, right? Like the first time you did it, there are a number of variables that all came together, right?
Yeah,
In
and I
that
had
moment,
no
and you
idea
said,
what they were.
and yeah, you may not have any idea.
No idea.
Over time, you keep experimenting, revisiting,
Yeah.
and you say, okay, this worked pretty good. And when I did that, didn't really do anything.
Yeah.
Whatever, and you kind of hone it and you refine it, and,
But
then
that's
you get to the
but
point where
that
you're like,
creation isn't
this is a
happening.
reliable technique.
But that isn't. I'm not building that based off of the idea of like perfection. I'm building that based on what works, right? Like I do a thing and it works.
So,
right?
let me
And
ask
then-
you
no,
this.
no, hold on. Like at first, I do a thing, and
Yes.
for whatever reason, it works.
That's not what
And then after that, the goal becomes, can I repeat that situation and
Yes.
find that again? And
Well, why?
maybe-
If it
maybe
just works for
maybe
being
it
works, then
maybe it works, maybe it
why
doesn't.
try to repeat it?
Well, because the first time something works, that's a coincidence, right? Or no, first time, fluke. Second time, coincidence. Third time, repeatable pattern.
You're using labels, right, or conclusions for the time, right?
What?
But if a technique is good in that moment, whether you understand all the reasons why it's good,
Yeah,
right?
it works.
It works.
Yeah.
Now, you may think, like, I've never hit that before, that was total fluke, I got lucky.
Yeah.
Whatever, that may be true, right? Like, that's
And
true.
that's why you go
But the
back and
technique
try to
itself
repeat
may be perfect in that moment.
And then you go back and you try.
Yeah, that's a process of discovery, right?
Yeah.
But the technique itself, when you
Yeah, well, that's
execute it,
the
was
thing.
correct.
Like the techniques are created by a process
Or-
of discovery, not by a process.
So let's
of,
say,
like,
go back to the
creating-
beginning, where you just have the person who's like blindly applying the technique, right?
Which technique?
An arm lock, in this case. And they just get lucky. The person, I don't even know what's happening. My arm's getting straight. Here, I tap. Let me go. Yeah. I'm out of breath. I don't know. What am I? I forgot I'm supposed to be at dinner. I gotta get out of here. I gotta tap.
Yeah.
You don't even know if the technique is the reason they tapped.
Correct.
Right? It could be because somebody like kicked them in the face or like
Yeah, that happens a lot.
whatever,
Yeah.
right? Just tap that one, you're like, oh, I got an arm lock. And they're like, no, this guy was,
Or then
you
his
know.
finger was caught.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay. Yeah.
But you don't go and just say, oh, I'm just going to keep doing whatever anytime. You actually try to consciously go through and test and see if it can be repeated and to see what variables actually contribute. Why? Because you're trying to build the perfect arm lock. So let's go back to the original
No, it's
example.
not that
Let me finish.
no,
Let me finish.
it's
I let you finish.
No.
I did. I let you say your thought. Let me say my thought. What?
I disagree.
So let's say we were training, right? And you do the arm lock that you do all the time.
Which one?
Let's say from S mount, you get here, whatever, right? And you start cranking on my shoulder, you separate my elbow, you're leaning way over that way, you're making me the offer I can't refuse, right? I can either let go or I can take damage on my shoulder, right? Whatever. And I just decide, or someone, it doesn't have to be me, just someone decides, I don't care.
Okay.
I'll take the damage.
Okay.
Right, so they sit there, they take the damage, they're getting like long term, you can hear it cranking, and you're doing the thing that you've done all the time, right? That you've developed, it's the perfect arm lock, and this guy just is not happy. He just decides, I'm gonna eat this arm lock, right?
Yeah.
Is that you, that your arm lock is not good enough, or is it the person who's just deciding, I'm gonna eat the arm?
What do you mean it's not good enough? His arm's breaking.
Yeah.
That's great. It's working.
Yeah, but he didn't tap, so he's not submitting.
Okay.
So is that a problem with your arm lock, or is that a problem if he's just not submitting?
How fixated am I on this one arm bar?
This is life or death.
Then yeah, that's probably my fault.
Is it your fault? Why is it your fault?
Because if it's not working, I should move on to something
No.
else.
We're talking about just the arm lock.
Yeah.
Not moving on to something else.
Yeah.
I mean, you can even take the example of moving on to something else, right? You move on to something else,
Like,
and
not
the
like-
person just will
not like
tap
move
to
on.
anything.
Okay.
The person is like, he's on PCP, and he doesn't feel any pain, or whatever pain he
Yeah.
feels is like,
Well, then that's a strategic problem. You should have choked him.
he just won't even tap to that.
Okay, you choke him out.
You can't choke him.
That's a you problem then.
It's a you problem. Why is it a you problem? What's the difference between for the choke versus the arm lock?
What do you mean? Well, the difference.
Why is it different that it's your problem with the choke and not with the arm lock?
The difference is with chokes, you can force the submission on someone versus an armbar. Like someone has to admit defeat.
Yeah.
You know, the choke I can put you unconscious.
Yeah.
And that's nice. Like I can force the submission on you safely.
Yeah.
Versus like having to break your arm and then convince you like, hey man.
So the difference in your mind is that if you execute the choke perfectly, regardless of the person's consent, right, the person will go to sleep.
Yeah.
Unless they're a mutant or some sort of space alien. They're not built like a regular human being. Right? They have 4 carotid arteries.
They have a brain and blood.
Yeah,
If
they're
you
human.
do a choke
You're not choking
the correct
like-
choke will inherently
Yes.
put someone unconscious.
So it's the person whose their consent is actually taken out of it.
Yeah.
It's not that there's a problem with your choke, right? It's that the person doesn't have a choice.
Well, but that's the thing. You need to consider that.
You can accept. So the person in both cases is accepting the consequences of this submission.
Yeah,
But the real difference is that the person is going to sleep and is being thereby disabled semi-permanently, right? When you put them to sleep, right? As opposed to you perform the perfect arm lock and the person can eat it. The problem is not your arm lock. It's the
No,
person.
the
It's not a problem. Well, I shouldn't say the
is-
problem. The challenge is that the person just isn't tapping. They made a decision to not tap to whatever it is you're doing. That's not a problem in your arm lock. That's a challenge that the guys presenting you with because they're just not. They're not tapping.
If they don't tap and they escape, there's something wrong with your arm lock.
Well, maybe if
you're
you escape, yes, but that's a different thing.
If they're there and you break their arm and now they have like 8 joints in
Yes,
their elbow,
like Jacques Arena.
and you're like,
Yeah.
but that wasn't Jacques.
Well,
Jacques got out and was running around. Like
Well,
a
he
chicken.
got out because his arm was so limp that he was able to get
And
out.
that's gross, right? But like,
Because at some point you don't have
If it
to.
was a perfect thing, I feel like you break it, nothing happens. Okay, like I would say, we're here, we break it,
Yes.
nothing happens. A perfect armbar.
Yes. Well,
So
maybe
you
not
just
like
keep
that.
going until they tap. Like that would to me be
Well,
a
I
perfect
mean,
armbar.
the thing is with these guys is that they're not just like sitting there like, okay, I just break my arm.
Yeah,
They're
that's-
actively escaping
That's
while you're
that's
breaking.
why I think that's not a perfect armbar, then, right? Like if they escape, if they defend and escape, you know, if you break it and you have another opportunity to do stuff, then maybe you have a perfect armbar.
Well, but then there are lots of different arm bars. Because there's some arm bars that you can accept the break and you will escape.
yeah.
And then there are other arm bars that are there's no escape. Whether you accept the break or not, you will. It's like a choke,
Do you
right?
wanna know a
Like
super
there are
big
some
secret?
chokes that what?
Do you want to know the secret?
What's the secret?
Like probably 30% of my arm bars couldn't break an arm when
Yeah.
I do them.
Mhm.
Like it's like you get a person's arm extended and they're pretty sure you could break it. I'm not going to tell you, but you know.
It's a game of chicken, right?
Yeah.
If you don't know the odds, I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah,
But so that's a tool problem. Like that's a Gordon Ryan issue, right? Like with Roberto Jimenez. Like if I just do a sit-out arm lock, right? Just a typical everyday sit. I can do a perfect sit-out arm lock, right? That we all learned, we all know, right? And a person can just accept the break and get out. If they just say like, I'm going to take the break, they're going to escape. And then there are other arm locks where if you break it, they're still stuck in there. And then you're in that situation where you're just like, I'm just going to keep breaking and inflicting pain on your arm the whole time.
should technique include concepts of strategy? Because like if let's say you're going up against a rubber-armed person,
Yes.
for someone with like adamantium elbows, right? And you decide to armbar them.
Is that a bad decision?
It's
Well, it's not the problem with the arm bar. That's the problem with your strategy.
But the problem with the armbar is that it's
It's not the tool that's necessary for the job at hand.
Yeah, it's
The person,
the wrong thing.
like if you know, for
It's
example,
completely
right?
wrong.
If you're trying to pass a Meow's guard, and you decide, I'm going to go for the toe hold here, that is the wrong decision,
Yeah.
right? Based on all evidence,
Even if
you will fail. Even if you do it perfectly, you will still fail in the attempt because they won't. You could break their leg, they still won't tap. You shouldn't do it unless you get points for submission attempts. If you're a fight to win and you get points for submission attempts, then okay, it's a good strategy, right? But I still distinguish between.
Strategy and technique.
Hmm?
We are distinguishing between strategy and technique. Like things can be good, solid techniques, like a perfect armbar, but the application of it is flawed. Like I have a knife, but I'm trying to use it to cut down a tree. It's a perfectly good knife.
It's bringing a knife to the gunfight, right? Like if Hodger were to have a rematch with Jacques Arena, like if he could go back in time, and with the knowledge that in the future, if he were to do that same arm lock, Jacques Arena would do the same thing. He would not attempt the arm lock again, not because there was any problem with the arm lock per se, but because it's not going to accomplish what he needed to accomplish. He might switch off at that point and try to go to a triangle or some other thing that would either, I don't know if he was so far down that a sweep wouldn't work in that situation, if he had to get the submission, but he would have to go to something else.
Do you remember the fight between Andre and whichever Gracie it was? One of the older ones. It was a while ago. Not Hoyler. Was it Hoyler?
Oh, did he fight Hoyler? Maybe. Hoyler. I mean, Hoyler definitely was still active when Andre got into the scene.
Or was Hoyler the Eddie Bravo one?
Hoyler was Eddie Bravo, but I don't know that they had met.
Another Gracie they fought, and I remember after, like the whole match, it was just Andre beating this guy up.
And physically beating him up.
Just just ragdolling him. However, couldn't submit him.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, it was Metamoris. Was it talking about Huron or Halleck? Not Halleck. It was Huron or it was one of the Gracie's sons.
Hiron, something?
Huron. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he beat him up, but he couldn't tap him.
Yeah.
And he was pissed at the end because he's like, all you did was stall, whatever.
Yeah, and well, and like part of the Gracies, they were like, oh, like if this had been a 30-minute match, then
Right,
they would
you
have
were
gone
tired because he was tired. You could see Andre was tired at the end of that match because he was trying to submit so hard.
But then Andre was like, bro, if it was a 30-minute match, I would have prepared for a 30-minute match.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they're just moving the goalposts, right? Like that's what that's what they always do.
Yeah.
Right? That's their thing. I mean, not in disrespect. I mean, they're awesome, but you know that's kind of like I treat it like a street fight. So if I don't lose, if I don't tap, then I win. You know.
Yeah. So I don't know that like application.
Nobody
of
buys
strategy I think is because could you say that like Andre didn't do good techniques because it didn't result in the tap, or was it like?
Well, I mean, there's there's good attached to the technique itself. I'm sure Andre, with any technique, almost any technique that he attempts in competition, is something that he's very good at. Like he can, and then there's good in the sense of like, what is the likely effect of this given technique, right? It's kind of like, bringing the proper tool to the job, right? But he, in his sort of defense in that situation, like, he's thinking coming into the match that the other person is going to attempt to do some jiu-jitsu, right? And not just defend the whole match.
So is that?
Which was, Huron's whole thing was like, I'm just not going to get tapped. Like that's all he had. He didn't have to play any offense. Yeah. He wasn't trying to submit Andre. I mean, they were playing two different games, right? There were like two ships passing in the night about like, Andre's trying to get the submission and he assumes like any kind of match that the other person's actually trying to win too. And that just, I don't think Huron did a single offensive movement in the whole match.
But like, would you say that Andre didn't get the submission is a strategic fault or a technical fault? Like, did he?
Could he have done it different? Well, another way to ask that question is, do you think that he could have done something different that would have led to a different result?
Yeah. And
he might have, like, let's say, for example, Andre decided to come out and be totally defensive.
Yeah.
Right? Like the way, Gordon and Gary and those guys do. Right? So, hey, I really want to put you on the offensive, so I'm just going to lay down right here. Right? And I'm going to let you come on top.
Yeah.
And, that's going to give you the bait that I need for you to come and like kind of engage with me, because he wouldn't engage. I think the most offensive thing he did was like try to like regard. And that's what he did. He regarded the whole time. Which is, look, anybody who can stay in a match with Andre Galval for 20 minutes and not get submitted is pretty damn good. But I think, Andre could have taken a different strategy to the match had he known that was what Huron's strategy was. But Huron wasn't trying to win the match. He was trying to win like the PR battle at the end of the match.
And I think my argument is that
where his definition of winning is different.
If anyone could do perfect technique, I would say it would be Andre or Gordon.
Yes.
So when these failures happen, because like Andre should have submitted him, and like if everything was regular, I feel like
if Huron had actually played a game that was the same game that Andre was playing, then yes, I believe that Andre would have killed him very quickly, in fact.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, Andre had that match against Chael Sonnen, where Chael basically just tried to stay in Andre's guard and like hold him down the whole time, like push him down. Chael was not trying to win that match. He was trying to just like stall Andre out. Don't hurt yourself.
Oh, that's heavy.
No one's even watching, so no one's even gonna see you die.
It's fine. It's probably for the better.
Are you trying out for Jackass? Is that what you're doing?
Maybe.
You see this all the time when guys are like in EBI or Abu Dhabi, and they're playing like an IBJJF game. They just come with that game, and they don't understand. And you could be successful that way. You could totally win, right? Not to say if you're good enough you can't win, but the guys who do win, they adapt their game to like the rule set and what other people are likely to do within that rule set. But I don't know that that's a problem with the technique itself per se. It's a problem with the application of the technique in the given circumstances.
Yeah. I hear you. That makes sense.
All right. What's the code word, Coach Kevin?
Perfection.
Perfection. You're looking at it right here.
I'm a specimen.
All right, we'll see you guys on Monday. If anybody ever watches this, which they may or may not, I don't think they will, but okay. I have hope.